Linda Harris Donaldson McCullough has been the unexpected and permanent Queen of Kentville for 3 years, 3 months and 3 days, give or take a few hours. She got her title not for merit, but through her marriage to Daniel McCullough, which gave her the right to enjoy all the benefits and amenities that the city had to offer. But in fact, these were just empty promises and memories. Despite the superficial appeal of clubs and hangouts, where Linda always took pride of place, these attributes of social status had no true value. The McCulloughs' true source of power lay in their wealth, accumulated by many generations of the family even before the appearance of the ancient house in which Daniel grew up. The McCulloughs are used to achieving success through hard work, strategic planning, and, if necessary, deception and cunning. Their influence and power in Kentville were unshakable, which indicates their ability to easily navigate the tangled web of social hierarchies. Linda has always relied on her appearance, believing that this is all she needs in life. That was until Daniel McCullough caught her attention. Despite the comfortable life in the middle class, Linda could not help but feel a craving for noble wealth, which seemed unattainable to her. Once, when she stumbled and almost fell, Daniel picked her up in his arms and gently scolded her. "You need to be careful," he said. Linda looked up at him, grateful for his help, and realized that there was more to life than just beauty. "I'm very sorry, sir. I do not know what came over me. Thanks for catching me before things got out of hand," Linda said. She smiled gratefully at the man, meeting his gaze, and regained her composure. Straightening her skirt and heels, she returned to the polished brass door that Daniel McCullough had opened for her. Although he didn't know her, he immediately took a liking to her, seduced by the sight of forbidden fruit under a short skirt. The sparkling ring on her finger did not attract his attention, despite its importance to another man. The McCulloughs were known for taking whatever they wanted, and Daniel was no stranger to their ruthless tactics. When they entered the building, Daniel went to the right, and Linda went to the left, to the elevators leading to the offices of Ladson, McCullough, Sperry. An advertisement appeared in the daily morning newspaper for an administrative assistant position at a company offering decent pay and benefits during a standard work week, which seemed like the perfect opportunity for Linda and her career aspirations. "Mrs. Donaldson, I am sure that we will reach a satisfactory agreement on the details and examine all your papers later. But for now, I would like to heartily welcome you to our company," the elderly man said. It was Tom Ladson, who confirmed his words with a firm handshake and a distant look. Sitting across from Linda, Tom Ladson could barely contain the saliva running down his chin. Linda's skirt was pulled up high, exposing too many of her smooth thighs. Despite the fact that he was already over 70, the old man's memories still worried him, although the physical limitations were obvious. Daniel McCullough watched the negotiations between them with interest. There was something about Linda that fascinated him not only physically. Her beauty was mesmerizing, and the way she acted at ease only fueled his desire to make her his own. He enjoyed looking at the stunning dark-haired woman in the two-way mirror on the wall, admiring her smile and the way she crossed her legs. The sight of her breasts heaving with every breath drew his gaze. "Thank you, Mr. Ladson. I am very glad to cooperate with you, and I promise that I will not disappoint you," Linda said gratefully. Ladson escorted her to another room for further instructions, leaving Daniel standing there consumed with passion and thirst. Tom didn't hire her for himself. She was supposed to work for Dave Sperry, another senior partner. At least that was the deal. Throughout the day, she was under the direct supervision of Daniel McCullough, the firm's senior managing partner. Mrs. Linda Donaldson, a 30-year-old woman who had been married for 10 years to the simple and unassuming Liam Donaldson, was famous for her stunning beauty. Coming from a modest family, she has never shown an interest in luxury and privilege. Liam, a middle-level manager at a small manufacturing company on the outskirts of the city, was hoping for a promotion as he gained experience. Their house was cozy, with a spacious room, a patio, and a swimming pool, which they used to meet with friends and neighbors. Linda and Liam moved to this city from a larger city a few years ago. Linda left her job at a law firm to support her husband's more lucrative factory job. But soon she got tired of all this and decided to go back to work. She didn't know that boredom would lead to her and Daniel McCullough getting new opportunities at the expense of Liam, her ex-husband. I was Liam, the simple man in this story. McCullough and Linda seemed to underestimate me, but I managed to get out of the situation unscathed. Linda started working at McCullough on Monday after the interview, and quickly got used to the role, as evidenced by her confident demeanor. At first, she worked from 8 in the morning to 5 in the evening, but after a few months, her schedule changed. She began to work in the evenings during the week, often returning home no earlier than 9 or 10 at night. Despite the long hours I worked at the company, I wasn't too worried. We still spent every weekend together, and life seemed to be getting better. After about 6 months of her work, I finally got the chance to meet her boss. It happened at the annual Christmas party, which was held at the McCullough family farm near the city. The farm was located on top of a hill overlooking fields, forests, and meadows. When we arrived at it, the territory was surrounded by high stone walls, giving it an atmosphere of exclusivity. Linda was gorgeous in her navy dress with a thigh-high slit, an open back, and a plunging neckline showing off her figure. Her long legs were accentuated by high-heeled shoes, and her dark hair was styled in a smooth French braid. The elegant look was complemented by a single string of white pearls. On the contrary, I chose a more casual outfit, a white shirt paired with dark trousers and polished cowboy boots, complemented by my usual smile. We had a little disagreement about our outfits, after which Linda shrugged her shoulders and we hit the road. Upon arrival at the house, we were greeted by a friendly young woman who led us into the living room, where we were introduced to the charming Mr. Daniel McCullough. Surprisingly, nothing was said about Mrs. McCullough, whom my wife hadn't thought about in the last few months. "I'm so glad you could come," he said with a smile, hugging my wife and kissing her on the lips. "You must be Linda's husband, Liam. I've heard a lot about you," he added, taking my hand in his with a hint of assertiveness. When our palms met, I responded to his firm grip without breaking eye contact. His excessive strength made me double the pressure, all the while assessing the stranger standing in front of me. He shouldn't have kissed my wife on the lips. I felt him begin to involuntarily loosen his grip. "That's right, I'm Liam. Nice to meet you," I replied with a polite smile, not taking my eyes off him. He shouldn't have kissed my wife. McCullough led a small group into the spacious hall of the house, where we chatted, shared stories, and entertained each other. Some of the guests were particularly charming, and I found that I really enjoyed these conversations. In the midst of all this, I realized that I had lost sight of my wife. After several unsuccessful searches of the room, I decided that she must have left with another group of women. Focusing on the fascinating conversation with the guys, I didn't pay attention to it. An hour later, Linda reappeared next to me, putting her hand in mine and assuming the role of a submissive wife next to me. I asked her where she had been, but she only replied with a vague explanation of an ordinary girl's conversation. Soon we said goodbye and went home, where Linda immediately went to the shower to go to bed as soon as possible. Little did I know that this seemingly harmless event marked the beginning of a decline in our marriage, a gradual decline that eventually led to a turning point. In the months that followed, Linda began to seem like a stranger to me, and it got to the point where lightning struck the center of our kitchen table in the form of a manila envelope. Despite the warning signs that we were moving further apart, I preferred to ignore them. Linda started working much longer, even adding Saturday to her schedule. I missed the promotion due to the favoritism of the factory director, which further aggravated the gap between us. Looking back, all the signs were obvious, but I was too inattentive to notice them. Her disappearance at the Christmas party was supposed to be a wake-up call about the impending storm in my life. Now, looking back, I realized that I was a blissfully ignorant fool who was dragged into a dangerous game by a cheating wife. When I entered the empty house, where everything was in its place, The only unusual thing was an ominous envelope lying in the center of the table. When I looked at the form, my body involuntarily tensed. In the upper left corner was the name of the company Ladson, McCullough, Sperry. Underneath it, my own name was staring at me. Taking a deep breath, I carefully unfolded the envelope and laid its contents on the table in front of me. It is correctly said that one can freeze from fear. Despite the fact that my senses were on high alert, my soul remained motionless, unable to digest the news. Among the papers, almost unnoticed, was a small diamond engagement ring. It belonged to my late mother and was a precious relic passed down to me from my father. I gave it to Linda more than 10 years ago when I asked her to marry me. The sight of the ring caused a flood of memories and emotions. I didn't need to read any further, but curiosity made me continue. The divorce petition signed by Linda confirmed what I already knew in my heart. Surprisingly, she only demanded cash, which she had already taken with her. There were 3 sets of documents, one for me, and the other 2 had to be signed, notarized, and sent to court. When I sat down in an armchair and stared at the papers, I was overcome by a feeling not so much of sadness as of emptiness and anger. Without shedding a tear, I quickly made a decision. Getting to my feet, I grabbed the documents and a box of matches and went out into the yard. With anger burning inside me, I watched every piece of paper turn to ash. "Go to hell, Linda. It's not going to end like this," I silently shouted to myself. Her whereabouts were unknown, as she did not answer the phone, and her family was far away. At 2 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon, I pushed open the polished brass door of Ladson and McCullough Sperry. The sound of cowboy boots and the smell of cognac filled the air as I approached the empty table. I muttered, looking around the office. Several employees scattered, as if trying to hide from the impending disaster. "She's not here, and if you had any sense, you'd be gone by now," a voice said from behind me. Turning around, I saw Daniel Patrick McCullough, dressed in a $2,000 suit and polished Brooks Brothers shoes. His impeccable appearance only accentuated his unpleasant behavior. "What do you mean she's not here? She works here, doesn't she?" I demanded. When a grin appeared at the corners of McCullough's mouth, I immediately realized who he was, my worst enemy. Memories of missing an hour at the Christmas party and all the late nights Linda spent working hard for her boss came back to mind. "Donaldson, you can leave the room, or you will be escorted out. Linda is safe, and you have no right to interfere in her affairs," McCullough said, his voice firm. Suddenly I felt the urge to leave and started turning towards the door. But then he made that sound, a loud, mocking kiss that made me feel insignificant. When I turned to him, his smile turned into a snarl, and then he made the mistake of speaking in a whisper, saying, "This tidbit is mine now. Get out of my office," he said in a cold and dismissive tone. Stupidity can manifest itself in various forms. His mouth was disgusting, and my hand was stiff and bloody as I grabbed his shirt and mercilessly attacked his eyes and dirty mouth. I saw that the teeth were scattered on the floor, but I wasn't done yet. The heel of my cowboy boot hit him in the groin, delaying any pleasure my unfaithful wife might have had. Before I could completely destroy his manhood, darkness enveloped me. Staring at the ceiling of a cell with sickly green walls and bright lights behind rusty wire mesh is a common activity for prisoners. The loud banging of steel doors locking with a key, bad food and bad company echo throughout the day. The only respite in the bustle of the Iron Resort usually came around 1 o'clock in the morning, when new arrivals were placed in the reception center until the next morning. I spent 2 days and 20 minutes in this place, first waiting for the court hearing, and then for my lawyer to post bail. I had to pay $5,000 for my freedom, but in the end, late on Friday evening, I found myself in a completely new world, flooded with sunlight. "Liam, listen to me. I know it's unpleasant, but I need you to keep a low profile and stay out of trouble." That's exactly what Jake Reynolds warned me about when we were drinking beer that night. Jake, the man who hired me 3 years ago, has been my mentor since day one. I have the deepest respect for him. With deep-set eyes and bushy eyebrows, he sipped his usual double whiskey. "This McCullough will kill you if you're not careful, young man," he warned me. He explained that McCullough and his accomplices controlled everything in the city, even the judge. Despite the danger, Jake promised not to let me out of his hands. There was a long-standing feud between him and McCullough, which arose during the construction of the plant 10 years ago. I do not know all the subtleties, but it was clear that they dislike each other. I am grateful to Jake for supporting me. I was very likely facing a substantial prison sentence, but my lawyer believed that, if I was lucky, I could avoid this fate by serving only a year in the county jail and receiving several years of probation. If things hadn't worked out in my favor, I could have spent 5 years in a medium-security correctional facility. It was very important for me not to get into trouble. After buying another portion for 2, we went about our business. After the fight with Daniel McCullough, it took some time to recover. According to rumors circulating among neighbors, McCullough suffered a fractured cheekbone, lost several front teeth, and received bruises under his eyes, which lasted for quite a long time. But the biggest blow to him was that I damaged one of his testicles, leaving the other unreliable. I can't imagine how people would find out such details, but I was pleased to know that I had caused him some trouble in response to all the ones he had given me. As for Linda, I had a restraining order placed on me, forbidding me to contact her or McCullough. I later found out that she lives on the McCullough farm and continues to work at a law firm. In our small town, restraining orders were a serious problem, which made it impossible for me to get closer than 500 meters to her, this fool, or their place of work. This meant that I couldn't even walk down the main street or have lunch at one of the 3 restaurants in the city center. Any appeal to the court would be a violation of the order. The first weekend after leaving prison was difficult. The fact that I was naive and did not foresee all this did not make it any easier for me to cope with the loss of the woman I loved, whom I had been protecting for 10 years. During these 2 days, I cried a lot and drowned my sorrows in alcohol. But on Monday morning I returned to work and was pleasantly surprised by how warmly I was received. Everyone seemed to be happy with how I handled the situation after that idiot stole my wife from me. Many women at the factory came to check on me. I wasn't going to let hurt emotions dictate my actions, but I have to admit that it raised my ego a little. Time flew by unnoticed, and 3 weeks later my trial took place. I studiously avoided adulterers, hoping to avoid more trouble. Finally, the day came, and on a clear Monday morning, my lawyer and I went to court. When we entered the hall, I noticed that several of my colleagues were present there. McCullough and Linda were sitting behind the district attorney, their eyes fixed on me. McCullough's gaze was piercing, and Linda seemed lost in her own thoughts. My lawyer had met with the prosecutor a week before, and to my surprise, they came to a plea agreement. It wasn't what I expected, but it was certainly better than 5 years behind bars. The agreement stipulated that I would serve 1 year in the county jail, suspended for 4 years on probation. In addition, I had to pay McCullough a huge sum of $22,000 for medical expenses. It all looked like a farce, considering that McCullough was a rich man, but I reluctantly agreed to the terms. The judge made an unexpected move, adding an extra day to my sentence. Despite the objections of my lawyer, they were rejected, and I was forced to serve all 12 months and 1 day in prison with no chance of parole. I could have been released after 244 days for good behavior, but now that opportunity has disappeared. Linda didn't say a word, but it was clear from her tear-stained face. Jake promised to take care of the house while I was in jail. My house was fully paid for, and I had enough money to pay taxes, insurance, and any unforeseen expenses. On Monday morning, I gave up and found myself in a cell with green walls the color of pea soup, next to 28 other prisoners and 6 guards. There were only 2 other people in the same cell with me, which gave us enough space to move around. One of them was sentenced to 30 days for drunk driving. and the other served 60 days for possession of prohibited substances. I felt like the biggest criminal among them. 3 months after serving my sentence, I received the divorce papers. Despite the opportunity to fight, my lawyer and I decided that it would be a waste of time while I was in prison. But the plus was that Linda got only the money she took when she left, and I got the house, savings, and property accumulated during our marriage. I had regular visitors from work and a few neighbors who came in from time to time. These events diluted the monotony of my stay here and made it more bearable, reminding me that I have friends who care about me. In the middle of my stay here, I came across an article in the newspaper that reported that Linda and this fool tied the knot in a lavish ceremony at the McCullough farm, which was attended by half the city. In the photo, the bride was depicted in a stunning white wedding dress with a train that seemed to last forever, and McCullough himself was smiling broadly with his new teeth. Later, I experienced the most terrible moment in my life and realized how great was McCullough's power and influence over those who held leadership positions. It happened late on Saturday evening, around 11:30, just after the start of the night shift. The prison employed prison guards, who were usually chosen by members of the county commission, many of whom were closely associated with Daniel McCullough. When I heard screams and screams coming from the common area, I got out of bed to find out what was the matter. A group of prisoners gathered around a large TV in the corner, completely absorbed in watching a movie. The video was very explicit and became more and more graphic, making the guys make more and more noise. When the man in the video turned to the camera and repeated the words that I had already heard, "Now this tasty morsel is mine," it was Daniel McCullough. He just grinned and turned back to my ex-wife. The prisoners greeted the couple joyfully, and I retired to my bunk. My cellmates were released long ago, leaving me alone. It was a terrible night, with tears in my eyes and restless sleep for the first time in months. The next morning, the taunts of the jailers almost threw me off balance, but I managed to somehow come to terms with it and focus on moving on. There were only 4 months left until the moment when I would be able to go out into the sunlight again with a clear conscience. Watching the video made one thing painfully clear. My wife didn't leave me in order to attract another man. Daniel McCullough, as far as I could tell, was not a star. The wealth that Linda Harris Donaldson McCullough had acquired seemed more tempting than a 10-year marriage with a faithful husband. For the last 4 months, I've been thinking only about how to get back at her, and I haven't thought about anything intimate. When the county released me, I left, taking with me only old clothes and the smile of the girl behind the counter, whose husband was my colleague at the factory. My lawyer met me in the lobby and we went to lunch, indulging ourselves with a double cheeseburger and a couple of pints of beer. Now that the restraining order was out of force, I could do anything. The remaining period, which was more than 1 year and 1 day, was suspended, meaning I didn't have to report to the police or the court. I was completely free. "Liam, I wanted to make sure you knew that so there wouldn't be any misunderstandings," Jake told me over a beer that night. "This arrogant asshole hit your ex-wife a couple of weeks ago and then claimed she fell down the stairs. She agreed with his story, but no one believed it." "Well, the grass is definitely greener on the other side of the fence, isn't it?" I remarked. Jake just looked at me strangely. "Well, son, I know you don't like her right now, but when I heard about it, I couldn't help but remember the girl I met when you two first came to town. I would not wish such a despicable person to marry anyone," Jake said. Jake was absolutely right. I despise this woman for her actions, but at the same time, I have loved her for a long time. Going through life with such conflicting emotions is incredibly difficult. It reminds me of my parents' struggles when I was little. My mother had a lover, which led to a temporary breakup between her and my father. After her death, my father and I had a heart-to-heart talk about life and forgiveness. He confessed that he hates her for what she did, but at the same time retains his love for her. He believed that the only way to move on was either to find a new love or to learn to coexist with the one he already had. It was a painful journey for both of them, but in the end, they found peace and reconciliation. He was faced with a choice between two options and could not continue to live in the same condition. In search of solace, I started chatting with a new woman, Sherry, who has been flirting with me since I was reinstated to my previous job. Jake kept his promise by keeping my position until I was ready to return, for which I was grateful to him. Sherry, who headed the logistics group at the factory and was several years younger than him, coincided with my work schedule, which led to frequent meetings. One Friday afternoon, I took a chance and asked her out on a date. That evening, I picked her up early, and we went to dinner at a new restaurant outside the city. She was superbly dressed, and I have to admit that I was nervous as a schoolboy on a first date. It's been 11 years since I've been with anyone but Linda, and it's been a year since I've been intimate with anyone at all. Sherry didn't simplify the situation with her incredible cleavage and undeniable femininity. I was completely charmed by her, and if she knew even a little how charmed I was, she could easily have fooled me. We enjoyed a wonderful dinner and a few drinks, after which we went to one of the 2 dance clubs in the city. A country band with big cowboy hats and a great selection of songs made us dance. Sherry was a fantastic dance partner, and if I had let her, she would have moved on to another one right there and then. I was glad she didn't, because I had a great time that night. Over the next few months, Sherry and I continued to date, and soon many people considered us a couple. 6 months later, she finally agreed to move in with me. At first, the presence of another woman in the house seemed strange. Sherry was the exact opposite of Linda in every way. She was petite, energetic, with blonde hair and blue eyes, and very sociable. She also loved cooking. As a local resident, she was deeply rooted in Kentville and actively participated in various community events. Unfortunately, this led to awkward situations for me. After Linda married Daniel, with whom she had an affair, she easily fit into all the social gatherings and clubs in the area. When she was my ordinary and uninteresting middle-class wife, she never showed any interest in local events. Now it seemed she was everywhere, including at the same social events as Sherry. In retrospect, I should have avoided committing to Sherry, but it didn't occur to me at the time. After Sherry informed me about this event, I readily complied with her request. "You need to rent a tuxedo," she said firmly. I asked her about the reasons, to which she replied, "Because we're going to the Kentville Garden Ball, and you're going to be wearing a black tie, that's why." How could I object? Without hesitation, I rented a tuxedo with a black tie and bought an amazing dress for Sherry. A couple of weeks later, we showed up at the ball. The event was exclusive, and only those who could afford expensive fundraising tickets and the necessary outfits were invited to it. Sherry, as a longtime member of the club, was supposed to attend the ball accompanied by her beau. The ball was attended by famous personalities of the city, and returning from the toilet, I unexpectedly met one of them. She ignored him, laughing at her companion's stupidity, and accidentally bumped into me. Our eyes met, and I saw in them a mixture of fear and regret, after which they quickly lowered, and then returned back. "Linda," I said her name without much emotion. It was the first word I had said to her since that fateful night when I found the papers on the kitchen table. It was also the first time I had seen her since I stood in the courtroom and received a sentence for confronting the man who took her from me. She struggled to find the words, and when I left, she could only whisper, "Liam, I'm sorry." I stopped for a moment, not knowing what to say, but eventually moved down the corridor and returned to the hall. Sherry was engrossed in conversation with 3 men and invited me to join her at the bar for a drink. One thing I knew for sure, I wouldn't have to worry about another man taking her away. She was scarred from her first marriage by a treacherous husband who tried to ruin her financially. Fortunately, one of the husbands of the women he was involved with convinced him to leave town and never come back, leaving everything to Sherry. When I returned to Sherry, she introduced me to her companions, who turned out to be old family friends. One of them took her to the dance floor, leaving me chatting with my new acquaintances. She winked at me as she left. knowing I didn't mind. Later, on the dance floor, she whispered in my ear, "Do you mind seeing her here tonight?" I understood exactly what she meant. In previous conversations, we delved into the problems that each of us faced. She kept her life a secret, but mine remained an unresolved tragedy. Personally, I'm fine. Our paths crossed in the hallway, but we didn't exchange a word. It looked like she wanted to talk, but she couldn't, and I wasn't interested in listening to what she had to say, I replied to Sherry. We danced in silence, and then she hugged me tightly. On our way back to the table, we passed Mr. and Mrs. McCullough, and this arrogant Daniel tried to make that strangled, slurping sound, but his false teeth, or maybe a block of ice, prevented him. I turned to him and suddenly heard Sherry say, "4 years, Liam. It's not worth it." She was right. When I looked back at my companion, I saw the shame on Linda's face. After returning, we spent the rest of the night making love, and finally fell asleep around 3 o'clock in the morning. I've always dreamed of watching the sunrise from my bedroom window, and around 8 in the morning, Sherry pulled back the curtains, revealing a clear Sunday morning. Naked and beautiful, she sat down on the edge of the bed and said, "I want to leave the house today and go to the mountains, but first I have to tell you something," she said. The first thought that came to my mind was that she might be pregnant. "I love you, Liam," she said. "I want you to know that I love you." These words were on the tip of my tongue the night before on the dance floor and during our intimacy, but I restrained myself. That's why I'm talking now. And now, as we stood together, I pulled her to me, hugged her, and whispered, "Sherry, I love you." I was afraid that my feelings would not be reciprocated, but now I know that they are. After a quick breakfast, we packed a picnic basket and went in search of adventures. We found a quiet meadow overlooking a green valley and enjoyed each other's company for several hours. "Liam, do you think you'll ever end your relationship?" she asked. "Yes." She decisively ended our marriage by filing for divorce and leaving me most of our property, and she ran away with another, I replied. There was a note of bitterness in my voice, indicating that the gap had not been reached. The following months passed quietly. Sherry and I had a strong relationship and the work was going well. Jake recommended me for a promotion, and my chances were great. But the only downside to all this was the constant presence of Mr. and Mrs. McCullough. They seemed to be interested in every aspect of my life, and attending events with them meant enduring Daniel McCullough's bullying and Linda's growing indifference to me. I suspected that Linda's indifference was a facade hiding her guilt. Despite the fact that we divorced a couple of years ago and moved on to a new relationship, the hidden resentment between us remained unresolved. Then the situation took an unexpected turn. One evening, returning from a charity event with Sherry, I saw flashing blue lights in the rearview mirror. The officer ordered me to get out of the car. I followed his instructions and stood at the back of my car while he got to the passenger side, where Sherry handed over her ID. The second officer watched in silence because I couldn't see what he was doing, but when he turned to his colleague, he said with a note of excitement, "Yes, it's true. We have a beautiful specimen in front of us. Let's try it." I went to the assistant, but he stopped me and pulled out a weapon, making me freeze in place. Realizing that common sense and reason are needed to mitigate the situation, I calmly said, "You're going to have to deal with us in cold blood if you plan to continue, and I don't believe you're capable of that," I told the deputy sheriff. He grinned and gestured at his partner by the car. "Do you know how fast you were moving? This was an excess of more than 30. Be patient for a while, we issue you a fine." When the officer returned, he handed me a speeding ticket with a quiet message. "Mr. McCullough sends his regards. Next time I catch up with you when you're driving around the neighborhood, I might have some fun with you. Is that clear?" he added. I took the ticket and went to the car. Sherry sat there, crying and shaking from the ordeal. "Come here," I said, and she moved closer to me. "Did that jerk even lay a finger on you?" I asked. "He touched my breasts, but nothing more," she replied. I was overcome with anger. I started the car and drove away from this place. Later that evening, I talked to Sherry and made it clear to her that I would not tolerate this, even if I had to face new consequences. Liam, I need you to listen to me. I can handle myself. I'm a grown woman. I don't want you to get in trouble for this. We both know who's to blame, and we'll figure out how to deal with it, Sherry reassured me. Jake brought me up to date after work on Monday. There are a lot of people here who are not fans of these guys, and I can guarantee that they will get what they deserve. In the meantime, focus on work, stay out of trouble, and keep loving your Sherry. Do you understand? Jake told me. I followed his advice and tried to stay out of trouble. A few weeks later, as I was leaving the bar after work, a deputy sheriff rushed by, followed by another patrol car and an ambulance. The next day at work, I learned the shocking truth about what had happened. The two lawmen were found tied up and taken to a gravel pit, where they were strongly advised to leave their posts and leave the county immediately. It turned out that they respected a woman named Sherry, who was liked by many strong men from the factory. But the departure will have to wait until you are discharged from the hospital. Life went on as usual until trouble appeared in the form of Daniel McCullough. That evening, McCullough and Linda went to the pub, while Sherry, Jake, and I, as well as several other factory workers, enjoyed a beer after a long day at work. McCullough and Linda, as always, were dressed to the highest standard, as if they were attending some kind of solemn event and not just drinking in a local pub. Although Linda had accompanied me to this pub in the past when we were married, I had never met McCullough, Sperry, or Ladson here. Their presence cast a shadow over the room, and when they took a table nearby, they were joined by a plainclothes county sheriff and another couple whom I did not recognize. When I caught a glimpse of them in my peripheral vision, Jake nudged my knee. "Listen, kid, pay attention to what's going on at this table. There's some nonsense going on," he muttered. Sherry, sensing that I was distracted, gently took my hand and led me back to our conversation. A few minutes later, McCullough left and went to the bathroom with two other men. Suddenly, Linda appeared at the edge of our booth. "Liam, can we have a little chat? When are you free?" she asked. I looked at her in disbelief and asked, "For what?" My answer was met with a sharp kick in the ribs from Sherry. "It's time to discuss everything, whether you like it or not. We have to try to fix everything," Linda explained sincerely. "I know you're angry with me, but I want to solve this for real." At that moment, McCullough and his companions returned from the toilet, and an enraged McCullough stormed into our table. He forcefully grabbed Linda's arm and dragged her away. I started to get up, but Jake held me back. Linda stood behind her husband, feeling small and scared as he confronted another man. "She's my wife, not yours," Daniel growled, his voice full of anger. "If I catch you talking to her or even standing next to her, I will slaughter you like a pig," he threatened, his eyes full of menace. Linda trembled, knowing that her husband was capable of anything. "Can you hear me, buddy?" he demanded, looking down at me. In response, I abruptly told him to go away. Perhaps it was arrogance caused by the fact that his friend, the sheriff, was nearby, or maybe it was his own belief in his invincibility. Anyway, my words spurred him on, and he rushed at me while I was sitting in the booth. His weak blow barely grazed my cheek. Without thinking, I rushed forward, grabbed his head, and lightly slammed his face against the edge of the table. He staggered and fell to the floor. The sheriff tried to intervene, accusing me of assault, but the man at the other end of the booth held up the camera, showing that McCullough had provoked the quarrel. Two men helped the humiliated Daniel to his feet and led him out, followed by a confused Linda. "Oh my God, that was amazing!" exclaimed Jake, raising his beer in celebration. "Nothing more pleasant could have happened to this cretin. Linda should have warned him. I've been boxing in the past. One day my father gave my brother and me a pair of gloves and started teaching us how to defend ourselves when I was 12 years old," I said. With witnesses who could confirm the truth of the events, I felt quite confident. This continued until about 3 o'clock the next day. An excited Sherry came up to me. One of the girls informed me that Linda was admitted to the hospital this morning. She was badly beaten. Her husband told the ambulance workers that she fell down the stairs because she was completely drunk. I immediately realized that this was a lie. Linda might have liked to drink in moderation, but she was not one to indulge in excess. Even when we were dating and having fun, I never saw her drink more than 2 glasses. She only drank in public places. I couldn't resist asking Sherry, "How serious is her injury?" "Liam, she's in the intensive care unit at Lane Memorial Hospital right now," Sherry replied. I didn't have to tell Sherry anything, because she already knew that I would be there for her no matter what. "Be careful," she warned me. I parked the car in the parking lot, walked through the emergency room and headed down the hallway. I recognized many of the nurses at the hospital. After all, it was a small town. The nurse on duty at that time had a brother who worked with me, and she and her husband came to my house several times for picnics. "Annie, which room is she in?" "I'll be careful," I assured her. Annie didn't hesitate. "Room 1202, right around the corner. Please take your time and stay for a few minutes," she said. I expressed my gratitude, turned the corner and looked into the ward. What I saw amazed me. She had bandages on her head, and her mouth and nose were swollen. His right arm and left ankle were in a cast, and his chest was also wrapped in bandages. She lay awake, unable to sleep. I reached out and took her small hand, trying to smile at the woman who had once been my wife. Over time, my love for her decreased, but underneath the resentment I felt for her, there was still a spark of affection. It's been exactly 3 years, 3 months, and 3 days since she let this man put a ring on her finger. I examined the ring in my hand and asked her carefully, "Did he do this to you?" Her eyes met mine, silently confirming my suspicions. I knew she wasn't the type to get drunk and fall into bed. I kissed her hand tenderly and quietly left the room, determined that he would never raise his hand against her again. The crackle of a house fire can be heard in the air, a sound that leaves an indelible impression. The charred wood crumbles, feeding a hungry flame that dances and jumps in the night. When firefighters arrive at the scene, they begin pumping water from cisterns to the flames, but life in rural areas is fraught with certain difficulties. In the absence of fire hydrants, even hundreds of gallons of water cannot cope with the fire that has been raging for half an hour. As the house is engulfed in flames, threads of fire break through the roof, turning the night sky orange. Firefighters are tirelessly working to contain the fire inside the house and adjacent buildings, and neighboring buildings are doused with water so that they do not die from heat and sparks. Sitting on top of a hill shaded by trees, I watch the destruction below. The fire devours everything in its path, destroying the farm, cars, works of art, and the rich history of Daniel Patrick McCullough. 150 years of legacy turned to ashes, and all because of someone else's wife. The morning light illuminated the fields, but smoke still rose from the charred wreckage behind us. But the tragic scene remained in the past, and I focused on the present moment. Sherry rolled onto her back, her body pressed against mine, urging me to wake up. Opening my eyes, I met her thoughtful gaze. "It's time to get up, Sonia," she said, reminding me of the barbecue we promised to have with her parents that day. 50 guests were expected that morning, and there was a lot to prepare. Despite being tired after a late night with Jake and his friends, I knew Sherry was right. I couldn't argue with the woman I loved. We arrived at her parents' house, ready to help with the preparations. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, guests began to flock to the house. Everyone was worried about the fire that happened the day before, and the mysterious disappearance of the owner of the house. I eagerly listened to every detail, absorbing it into myself. It turned out that Daniel Patrick McCullough disappeared after the ambulance crew took Linda to the hospital. Some speculated that McCullough could have started a fire and fled the scene. Others noted that the old house is a fire-prone place. As the evening went on, more and more guests arrived at the barbecue, each of whom had their own theories about what had happened. Despite the gossip, no one had any information about McCullough's whereabouts. Eventually, the barbecue ended, and Sherry and I decided to meet Jake and his wife, as well as a few other friends, at our favorite bar. Firefighters found Daniel McCullough's body in the basement of a burned-out house, Jake told us quietly. It's not clear what happened there, but he was dead before the fire. For a moment, we were plunged into stunned silence, shock reflected on the faces of each of us. Despite the tragic news, there was no noticeable grief for the deceased at our table. Jake's wife asked about the cause of the fire, to which Jake replied uncertainly, "I do not know. They suspect that the cause may be old wiring, but the fire was so strong that the exact cause may never be determined." The men noted that the fire inspector will investigate in the coming days, but they doubt that crimes such as arson or murder are involved in the case. Jake chuckled at the grim irony of the situation, and we all raised our mugs in a silent toast. After the fire inspector completed the investigation, it was determined that the initial fire was caused by faulty wiring, possibly due to a lightning strike. The sheriff's department ruled McCullough's death to be his own negligence, despite the fact that I was questioned twice about my whereabouts that night. My alibi was solid, and Jake and 6 other witnesses vouched for me. After the fire, federal investigators and bank auditors arrived at Ladson, McCullough, and Sperry to check the firm's finances and investments. Although no crime was found, 2 months later the company filed for reorganization in connection with bankruptcy. But in the end, they faced liquidation after the federal government imposed significant fines on them for various violations. Despite all this, Daniel McCullough's condition remained relatively calm. 2 weeks after she was discharged from the hospital, Linda moved into a guest house on the farm to sort out her late husband's affairs. Surprisingly, he didn't have a will. One of his ex-wives and his daughter will inherit his fortune, and Linda will be left without anything. It seemed that Linda's reign as the ubiquitous Queen of Kentville was over when her husband vented his fierce anger at her. After finally talking to Linda, I found out that she knew some things, but didn't know many others. She never found out about the incriminating video shown in prison, nor about his toxic behavior in an office building on that fateful day a long time ago. She turned pale when I told her that this video gives pleasure to those who are in prison and are considered the lowest stratum of society. Despite her initial reaction, it didn't matter in the end. "Liam, I know it won't change anything, but if I could go back and do it all over again, I would never make that choice," she confessed. "The guilt of leaving you weighed on me, and I quickly realized my mistake. I was fascinated by the fame and fortune of the famous Daniel, but realized that I was just a thing to him," Linda said. "This man was nothing like you, Liam. I realized that I was just another conquest for him. Even though I was married, this man saw you as an enemy and pursued me. In the end, I realized that all the wealth and glamour don't mean anything. You can't find happiness in all this," Linda added. "He was the most pathetic excuse for a man I've ever come across when I really got to know him. He started physically abusing me while you were behind bars, and didn't stop until he sent me to the hospital the night he did." "Well, he died in the fire," she said. As she spoke the last words, she looked at me intently, slightly raising one eyebrow. I couldn't pretend to understand the depth of her words. "Now you ask why? There's no logical explanation for this, Liam. It has nothing to do with you or your actions. It certainly wasn't a reflection of his masculinity. God, I was such a fool. I left a wonderful man. Yes, Liam. You are a wonderful, intelligent, and compassionate person, and Sherry is incredibly lucky to have you. I gave up everything for what I thought was a better life, and only now realized my mistake," Linda said. "Have you ever really loved me, Linda?" I asked. She sat in silence for a while, lost in thought. I've asked myself this question countless times, feeling guilty and betrayed. If only I could convince myself that I didn't do it. Maybe I could justify my actions as something heroic. Despite lying in bed with the man I called my husband for 3 years, my love for you, Liam, has never waned. Even now, when you marry Sherry, my love for you remains. But I also understand how much pain I caused you, and it can't be fixed. Isn't that right? Linda replied. Looking at her, I saw how guilt and abuse affected her. She was still undeniably beautiful, the most beautiful woman in town, but there was a new hardness in her eyes. She was no longer the woman I married, just as I was no longer the man who sat at the kitchen table and read the divorce papers. At that moment, I hugged her for the last time, and we shared one last passionate kiss. Despite my intense dislike for her, I couldn't deny that I still loved her. Clutching a small box in my pocket, I was nervous, like a mouse sneaking around a church in search of the owner's cat. Sherry, as always, looked amazing. I asked her in advance to dress up for our evening together, as I wanted to walk around the city. We went to our favorite restaurant on the outskirts of the city, where our first date took place almost 4 years ago. "Come on, Liam. If you don't ask me soon, I'm going to have to go to the bathroom," Sherry joked, breaking the tension between us. We both burst out laughing, and at some spontaneous moment I got down on my knees in front of other diners and proposed to the woman I adored. When she accepted the offer and I put my mother's ring on her finger, we kissed for a long and sincere kiss, accompanied by cheers and applause from the restaurant's customers. Linda, who was once a source of disagreement between us, was even invited by Sherry to our wedding. Unfortunately, she had to miss this meeting. Soon after our wedding, she left the city for good. Having first arrived as the stunning wife of a middle-level manager at a small manufacturing factory, she eventually became the wealthy widow of another man who could not fully comprehend the consequences of his actions. About a year later, a generous sum of $1 million mysteriously arrived in my bank account, along with a short note expressing gratitude for saving my life. Money has never been a problem for me, so I was not surprised by the unexpected admission. As for Daniel Patrick McCullough, he is now only a distant memory, mentioned in the records of the City Historical Society. Despite the lengthy obituary that described his supposed achievements, in the end, it all turned out to be meaningless. His life ended tragically. He was found dead, and his property was on the verge of being engulfed in flames.